Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's Substack Live with Sustainable Media Center. My name is Emma Lemke, and I serve as the Director of Gen Z Advocacy for SMC. And I'm so honored to be joined in conversation today by Ava Smithing and Nick Roberts. A little bit more about today's conversationalists. Ava is a youth digital activist who works to build practical solutions to the impractical problems placed upon young people by big tech. Ava served as the Advocacy and Operations Director at the Young People's Alliance, a youth fellow at the Center for Media, Technology, and Democracy at McGill University, and now she works as a founding partner at the Attention Studio. So we are so glad to have you on, Ava. A little bit more about Nick. Nick is a fierce Gen Z advocate and politician from Indianapolis. He served as the counselor of the 4th District of Indianapolis City Council since 2024. And at the time, I found this out and I am shocked by it. At the time of his election, he was slated to be the second youngest person and the first member of Gen Z to serve on the council at 23, and the youngest elected official for any of the 50 largest American cities, which is huge. And especially as we talk about in SMC's world, we want to see young people having a seat at the table, and you're doing exactly that. So super grateful for both of you for being, Gen Z leaders in the space. But for today's conversation, we can obviously see that the through line here is Gen Z political representation. You both are outstanding voices representing our younger generations in places where young people need a seat at the table. So this idea of Gen Z representations in politics is where I want to kind of dig into. But before we take a deeper dive, I always kind of try to give our conversationalists a chance to walk listeners through their story a bit, to know them a little bit better beyond just my introductory remarks. So let's start by walking listeners through how you both became to be kind of Gen Z activists and advocates in your own regard and who you are today. So I'm going to start with you, Nick, and then we'll move to Ava.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks, Emma, for having us. Really looking forward to this. And honestly, my story was kind of very organic. I do not come from a political family whatsoever. I would always say people were interested in politics, but none of them were ever elected to anything or even got involved in campaigns. But really, it was after the 2016 election when Donald Trump was elected the first time. And I was like, man, this sucks. I'm like, this guy is terrible. And I was not a fan of him then. Not much has changed in that way. And I really just started organically working on Democratic campaigns, working my way up. I started running some local campaigns here. And there came a point where I was helping out so many people. I was getting really involved in social media. And the seat that I was on for the city council was going to be open. I knew I had the support if I did to run of a lot of the different local elected officials. I'd helped out almost all of them in the years past. And I knew I had a great work ethic. I knew I could put in the time. And I decided to run. It was very tough. It was actually the most expensive council race in Indiana history, which was
Mm.
very difficult to win. But I'm in a very purple area of the city, so all Democrats and Republicans up here. But thankfully, I won. Been in office 2.5 years now, and genuinely love it. 95% days. It is so unique. Getting the chance to be in local government, honestly, is my favorite thing. Because even though I think a lot of Gen Z, especially when they're interested in politics, they want to start on the national level. Local politics are really where you can make, in my opinion, by far the biggest influence. So been in office 2.5 years now, loving it, and obviously love getting the chance to represent Gen Z.
Beautiful. Now talk to us about your path, Ava. I know it's very winding.
Yes, it is. So I grew up, I did not come into this from a political background. I was very issue specific. I grew up having a really weird relationship to technology. I was always very, very discerning of new technologies in my life, and I never really knew why. It wasn't until Frances Haugen blew the whistle on Meta in 2021, and I read the Facebook files in the Wall Street Journal that I had this huge moment, this eureka moment. I was like, oh, I don't like technology because of the way that technology has impacted my life. I was one of the teenage girls who got recommended with a lot of really, really negative and nasty eating disorder content on social media. And I just kind of intuitively felt that there was something wrong, but it wasn't until Frances blew a whistle and said Instagram is intentionally giving teenage girls eating disorders. So I was like, oh, this isn't my fault. And that's what pushed me into recovery. And that just, it was all a whirlwind. I changed all my majors to the history and philosophy of technology, and I started studying public policy, and I just started looking at avenues for change and how we could go work to hold these companies accountable. And then I realized that there really wasn't that much going on insofar as trying to hold these companies accountable. And then I found you on LinkedIn, Emma, actually, which is like the best part. I found you and I was like, oh wow, like this young woman is out there speaking her mind and saying how she feels. I can probably do that too. So I started doing that. Ended up finding Sam Heiner, the advocacy director of YPA, and moved to New York, like, or not to New York, I don't know what I'm talking about. Moved to DC a week after I graduated from college and started showing up on the Hill and knocking on doors and saying, "Hi, I'm Ava. I think that you should hold big tech accountable." Um, yeah, it's really been a journey. I had to get pushed into my first ever lobbying office. Like, I did not want to do it. I didn't think that young people should have a voice. I thought that the elected officials in government were so busy and I was just bothering them. But no, like, our taxes do pay their salaries, so you're allowed to bother them because this is a participatory democracy. And learning that was a really beautiful lesson for me. And now 3 years later, I haven't left DC. It'll probably be a long time before I leave DC. Just signed a 2-year lease. I'm locked in here because I definitely agree. I think that there's so much room for change at the local level. Um, and I'm glad that folks are doing that change at the local level so that I can dance around at the federal level and push a very, very slow change through. Yeah.
Absolutely. And thank you both for sharing. I think that while you both have very interesting and different ways that you kind of got involved, I think it shows that Gen Z, oftentimes I am similar to you, Ava, where I, for a second, didn't think Gen Z necessarily needed a spot at a legislative federal level. But to your point, you get pushed into the meetings, you run for office, you do the thing, and you kind of realize how important it is to have Gen Z in those positions of power to be able to kind of understand how the world works, specifically from a youth perspective. And, people who've grown up with the online world, it's super important to have that, narrative and that lived experience. But talking a little bit more about, assumptions, what assumptions do both of you think people make about you because of your age, and how have you had to learn to navigate them? Because we've talked about that, like I said, specifically for you, Nick, I can't imagine, you come in at 23, like I can see a lot of barriers there, but talk us through how you have, learned to navigate through them and how you kind of talk through your age with the lack, in quotes, of experience that a lot of other local politicians might have.
It was so fucking hard. I can't emphasize enough. When I was running for city council, I was 21 and I was running for city council, and I looked like I was like 12. I got that every single day. And my district is actually the oldest district in the city. The average voter to my election was 62 years old. Okay.
Wow.
And it's a very wealthy area too. So it's a lot of people, they've lived successful careers. They are doing great in life. They have grandkids or kids that are my age. It's like, who the heck is this young kid who's running for my city council seat, right? And I do think some of it is just how you present yourself, right? Like, I would never like this, knocking doors or going to a city council meeting, right? Like, I try to be very professional, which is, like, I think the most important thing. Being punctual, being respectable, right? Like, there are a lot of things that are hard, but it's also very difficult for me because my brain is fried. I am like total ADHD. Like, I talk really fast. I have a lot of bad habits that I wish I did not have, but I think it's about kind of just treating yourself with the respect you want from other people. What I've honestly found, and this is a good lesson, I think, is that, again, if you do treat yourself with respect and other people with respect, it'll come back to you. And I thought coming into elected office, where I'm obviously the youngest person, I would be disrespected and I'd be treated differently and people would be a jerk to me. And obviously that's the case with some people, but honestly, most people that do that are jerks to everybody. So that would be their reason to be a jerk to me, but it's not really a big deal. But honestly, I can't say enough great things about. I do think that, again, if you come at it with the right attitude and also not coming in it when you know everything, I think a lot of people in Gen Z think they know more about being in office than the people that are already in there, which is fair. But if you come at it with that attitude, I think it might come off entitled sometimes. But if you come at it with just a humbleness, with a patience, which is also hard. I'm not patient, so I had to learn that trait as well. That I think it will be received well long term, but you have to give it some time because that's a really difficult thing to do, is be patient with government, because everybody wants change immediately, and all the instant gratification, we're taught that so early on, but it's so difficult in government to actually have that just patience with people.
Mhm. And Ava, I know you come at it from, again, a different perspective, oftentimes from like a lobbyist perspective. So coming in wanting to see that change. I know one of the first lobbying meetings I ever had was with, ironically, RIP, was with Lindsey Graham after I testified in front of Congress. And I remember, stepping into the room and him just saying to me, like, what do you have to say? And me being shocked that I was like, wow, someone in a position of power is giving me a productive seat at the table. So kind of talk us through your experience of, navigating those assumptions that often people have about your age and your experience and just navigating it in general in a tumultuous political environment.
Yeah, I definitely think the biggest misconception people have is that young people only have lived experience and that they don't have expertise. Something I say all the time is the lived experience that young people have gives them expertise.
Mhm.
Our intuitive understanding of this world and our exposure to this world gives us expertise. Like, I think that growing up on social media, growing up online, and watching kind of in existential dread all of the worst aspects of the government flash before your face, yes, is could be considered a disadvantage, but I do think in some ways it is an advantage because we have like a very intuitive understanding of like systemic inequalities and like what structural things need to be changed in order for people to have better quality of lives. And that is because of the amount of like existential information we consume. So I think the biggest misconception is that our lived experience is valuable to be tokenized. So we, like you or I, Emma, can go and tell our story and then we're done talking, we don't have anything else to add, but that's not the case at all. Like, we do have a lot of expertise, and that's what I love about that Graham story you just told. And also it speaks to the character of who Senator Graham was, not necessarily like as a person, but as a legislator. Because we do have expertise, and it was really hard to prove that to people, to be completely honest. Like, that wasn't something that people just automatically thought. Like, I had to fight for that. And I think the way that I fought for that is, instead of like trying to prove that I knew everything and saying all these things, is I would just ask really, really thoughtful questions to people. And when I first started getting in these spaces, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to be on the top of them or have a leadership role right away. So I was really patient and I was very discerning, and I asked a lot of questions. And I asked people to meet me individually to explain things to me. And I would just like soak up the expertise of all of the people who were older than me in the room like a literal sponge. And then after they all saw me for that amount of time soaking up that expertise, I think that it helped them to trust me as a leader. And then I was able to adapt and be more confident and outspoken and like assertive, as opposed to asking questions all the time. But I think that's my good advice, is like, if you ask someone a really thoughtful question that's going to change their mind or like make them think about something, then they will think that it was their idea, and it goes over a lot better actually than if you just tell them what your idea was in the first place. So that's definitely how I built it up. And then I think that there is a sense of professionalism that Gen Z has a hard time stepping into. And on the Hill, you have to be very professional. I mean, there are dress codes, there are rules and whatnot, and there is definitely etiquette. And so I just think a willingness to not be frustrated with the professionalism of it all is really important. But then again, expressing yourself is also very, very, very important. So like, I like to give and take. I know that if I'm going to be in a buttoned up stuffy room where I'm going to have to like be very patient and hold my tongue and ask a lot of questions and like use like chairman to address somebody, that I am going to wear like a really bright outfit, or I'm going to do like, I'm going to have my silly little journal with all my beads all over it in there. Like, I love to bring with me some way of expression of my generation and my culture into a meeting, is like, that juxtaposes the adaptation I have to do to kind of fit into that space. And I think slowly, the other thing I realize is like, after you build up after you do build that respect with people, then you can lean more and more and more into the Gen Z. Like, every time I get on a meeting, I get just a little bit crazier. And now that's the thing that my colleagues love the most about me, is that I'm going to come into a Zoom and be really, really authentic, be wearing my like Adidas tracksuit instead of a button-up shirt. And they can't deny that what I have to say is valuable, because they realized it had value when I was adapting. So it's like, adapt first and then you can slowly pull out of it. But Gen Z is so special, you know, we're really good at expressing ourselves. And I think as long as you're just respectful to people, then you can be silly and goofy, but just be respectful. Like, be respectful. And it's really frustrating for us, I think, because we grew up watching institutions fail us a lot. We watched government fail us. We watched, you know, over and over again, people get elected that we didn't relate to. So I think that there's a lot of frustration for folks in older generations that they let us down. And I totally understand that. But individual people, there are individuals who did it. But I just like to be as respectful as possible to every individual and not take that resentment out necessarily on them, but rather take that resentment out on the larger system itself, and channel that into the quieter work that I do on my own. Like when I'm at home typing something up, like that's when I let all my anger out, not when I'm talking to someone who could at some point help advance the help advance what I want to advance,
100%. And what I'm hearing, I think, with both of your really thoughtful responses is like a need for, like both of you said, respect, kind of a level of intentionality, and also patience. And I totally agree with you, Ava, in the sense that I think professionalism is very difficult for Gen Z because I think Gen Z places such a high value on authenticity and expression. But I do think that, like to your point, Nick, like sometimes like you enter the room and you need to be wearing that like button down, especially like if you know your target audience and you're like running for office, like you just kind of have to adapt in some regard. But I love your kind of stipulation, Ava, which is like adapt, find the entry points for you to express yourself, and then also kind of grow in your authenticity as you kind of grow into yourself as a professional. I think that that's a really kind of great path forward. So I know that you talked about it briefly, Ava. I'm interested in your perspective, Nick. So Ava talked a little bit about kind of your advantage that you felt like you had in being Gen Z through your expertise and through your experience. You're in office, like you work in local politics. What do you think has been the greatest advantage that being Gen Z has brought you in your work?
I cannot emphasize enough how big of an advantage it is in a lot of different ways. And also, just like one quick example, because I loved all things Ava said. My favorite thing is I would have never done this 2 years ago. I showed up to a council meeting literally a couple days ago with some bubble tea, and I got so many funny reactions from that because I love bubble tea or boba or whatever people call it these days. And I would never done that a few years ago. Be like, what is that drink? And now people laugh, but I think I would have got a very bad reaction if I'd done that a couple of years ago. But now that people have gotten used to me, as you said, those manners people are more used to. But I do think Gen Z is at a huge advantage in politics, getting involved, especially early, for a few very important reasons. Number one, and arguably most importantly, you can lock in at a level that older people cannot. I don't think I fully appreciated this until I ran for office when I was able to dedicate 50, 60, 70 hours a week to running my own campaign, right? By knocking doors myself because I was physically able to. I was able to cut
Mhm.
the turfs by myself, like on Van, because I knew how to do that, right? Like I was able to digitally fundraise and create my own graphics and manage my own social media. Like that was a massive advantage because most older people have to hire someone to do that for them. But if you have that background, I think everyone that's a digital native, like I was on Facebook when I was fucking 7 years old. Okay. Like I've been on Instagram since I was 12. I've been on all the social media sites. That was basically a baby. So I'm native to all of them already. That is massive. And also too, a bigger point too, that's great is I found this even older people want young people in elected office, right? I think again, they may not want everybody in there, but if you can show that you have the same respect and the same work ethic and the same values as other people that might be older and have things in common with them, I will tell you this, like I still door knock 2 or 3 days a week. My biggest support base are especially grandmothers that are like 80 and 90 years old, right? And almost every single time it is unequivocally a very positive conversation. There are a lot of conversations we can have also of being, quite frankly, men versus women, how they treat different demographics. If we had another hour on this conversation, we could probably talk about that at length. But I do think people that are older also recognize, I think especially people that are of that generation that came about in the 60s and 70s, and there's a lot of protests and a lot of young energy back then too. They also know how important it is. So I would just say that people want young people in the fold. And even if they disagree with you, like I do find they have a lot of that same appreciation for it. And, again, and secondly, again, think about locking in, like you can really commit yourself to being not just a candidate yourself, but if you're working on a campaign, there's a reason why most campaigns are filled with young people because young people, I think, have the capacity to really commit themselves to campaign. And honestly, a lot of older people just do not really have the time or capacity to
Mhm.
do.
Oh, look, you have thumbs up to yourself in that. Okay, wonderful. So I think that that's a great note. I think that like I think oftentimes like to your point earlier, Ava, like I think sometimes because of the existentialism that we faced online and because of the lack of desire for professionalism and things like that, like I think it sometimes can lead people to not want to take a political path, specifically a local path, like you said, Nick. Like I think sometimes people want to jump that and kind of go federally or nationally speaking. But I think it's just so important to continue to emphasize like that you can make such a difference at the local level, specifically when you're a Gen Z and specifically when you have that digital perspective. And like you said, being a digital native provides so many benefits. Like we talk about a lot of the harms, but like being digitally literate is a gift, especially in today's age, and specifically if you want to make a difference and mobilize and organize. So talking a little bit more about technology, I have two more questions. One, so technology we know has fundamentally changed how young people engage with civic life. In both of your views and opinions, has social media ultimately strengthened democracy for Gen Z or made meaningful civic engagement more difficult? Again, I know it's a more nuanced answer, but let's kind of explore that nuance together. I'm going to start with you this time, Ava, and then we'll move to you, Nick.
I love this question so much because it allows me to demonstrate this. I think in a vacuum, social media has made politically engaging for Gen Z so much worse. Our political system is so polarized. Algorithms optimize for outrage, so you're going to see the things that either you disagree with the most that make you so mad, get your blood pumping, or you're going to get stuck in an echo chamber and you're only going to be seeing content that you agree with, and that is what's radicalizing people. I also think that there's definitely an issue with performance solidarity when you feel like you are being active just by posting something, but it's not necessarily doing as much. So I think like also our attention spans are harmed by social media, and it you do have to have a good attention span to like really be paying attention to what's going on. And I also do think that social media has this like inherently eroded like objective truth, because if you make a good enough argument and have a good enough post and enough people like it, you can really convince anyone that anything is true. For all these reasons, I would say that in a vacuum, political action for Gen Z is way worse, but not in a vacuum, it's not. So the only frame of reference that we have is the life that we've lived. So we don't know what life was like before. We don't know what life was like before it was this insanely polarized, before all we saw online was rage bait. Like we don't know what it is like to have a great attention span. And we're resilient as heck, and we adapted so well to all of those things. Like obviously there's mental health crisis. Obviously we're facing so many issues, but I think that Gen Z is so resilient. And I think that like it is going to be a net positive because the pendulum has to swing back. And I think that like for us who have no frame of reference from before, we're getting to that point where we're seeing how bad it is, and the energy and the momentum that is going to come from Gen Z wanting to get out of the control of these big tech companies and wanting to live in a political environment that isn't arbitrated by Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk is going to push that pendulum to swim so far back. And it's going to give us this energy to make change that I think is so much stronger than previous generations have had in the past, because I don't think that any previous generation has necessarily like by a company had their freaking individual liberties like oppressed in such a way by these five people in Silicon Valley at such a broad scale across all groups of people, you know, not only marginalized communities. And I think that that's really going to light a fire under us. I also believe in the potential. Like I'd say all the time, what we have right now is not social media, because that would imply that what Mark Zuckerberg has created is inherently social, and at this point it's not, as an advertising machine. I think that like when we start to build actual social media products and actual tools and technology that is going to allow us to civically participate in a truly democratized way, oh my gosh, it's going to be the best thing that has ever happened, ever. And so I definitely think like there is tension there, and it's a push or pull, but I just have so much hope for how Gen Z is going to react to the political environment that we're going to put in. And like you said, Emma, earlier, we are so keen on being authentic. And I think that we are going to be a generation of politicians who doesn't give a crap about taking money from stupid tech companies, who doesn't give a crap about lying and fundraising and kissing babies' heads, who just wants to make a difference, because we grew up exposed to politicians who are performing on committees for Instagram Reels, you know? So I'm really, really excited. I think that there will be a period of discomfort, and we're in that period right now, but I'm really, really excited about the potential of what technology can do for our democracy and for Gen Z.
100%. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, it's such a hard question to answer. I think I would probably lean towards what Ava was saying earlier about I do think it is negatively polarizing us in a way that is so hard to get past, right? Like, I'll tell you this, like, I, like, even just literally, I was at a community event like 2 hours ago, and one of my like top online haters was there. Okay, and this guy is like 70 years old, um, and he is so mean to me on social media, so mean to me. But in person, he was chumming it up with me, super nice, and I will say that is the case almost every single time. But it is so hard to break through the discourse on social media because the most negative and the most partisan and the most just hyper attention seeking people get all of the recognition, right?
Mhm.
And just the negativity is what gets me because as you know, Ava noted, Meta and Musk and all these groups, right? They intentionally prioritize controversial content, which I do think it creates a lot of conspiracy theory content that's at the top of the list. It creates a lot of just negativity and even in local government too. Like it is amazing to me how to so many people everything is a freaking conspiracy theory, right? Like everything is so negative. The sky is falling. We hate everything that we do. And I think again, when I'm talking to people in the community, door to door or at community events, it is always 100% positive. But the internet is not real life. It really is not. And I think if people are getting all their political coverage and beliefs from social media, they would be very shocked what actually going to talking to people in their community would actually produce. And I do think, in a positive spin, I think there are some politicians obviously doing it very well. We don't need to hear this, but Mamdani and AOC obviously really exceptional at social media. The stuff that I see that resonates most with Mamdani sometimes is just his like man on the street interviews, right? Women on the street interviews, right? Like
Mhm.
talking to people away from all the internet of it all is such, I think, a powerful message because people get so, sucked up by just the negativity. And the example that I always give is if I'm spending all day on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or Twitter or anything like that, I would see just nonstop negativity about Republicans, right? And I'm a Democrat. I'm a Democrat elected official. I'm 100% Democrat. I mean, I should say 100, but mostly a Democrat. But if I was to only look at my social media feed, I would think that Republicans are just the complete and total enemy, right? And just that they're all terrible people. They're also mean to Democrats and also cheaters. But I knock doors, right? Like I get just as good of a response from Republicans as I do Democrats these days. And I do think that's why local politics will hopefully maybe get us out of it some way. But I do think politics is becoming more and more and more national. And the rhetoric keeps getting ratcheted up higher and higher. And I think it's really hard to break through. So for now, again, I do agree it's negative. Hope it can turn positive at some point. But I do think the just the divisiveness and the negativity is so hard to break through with right now.
Mhm. And I completely agree. I think that oftentimes, and Ava, you know this well, like when you're in the space, you talk about, a lot of negative attributes of the online world. You talk about everything from cyberbullying to polarization, to just the mental health crisis of younger people. But I want to end on a bit of a brighter note because we want to break that pattern. So I'm kind of curious, again, the through line here is both of you are involved in politics and you're Gen Z, you're engaged say for someone in Gen Alpha or someone younger who is really, growing up in this online world is a digital native beyond what we even comprehend, probably younger at getting, social media and technology at younger and younger ages. What would you say to someone like that who's wanting to be involved in politics? Like what's like one piece of advice you would give someone who's trying to follow in your footsteps and engage politically as a digital native? I'll start with you, Ava, and then we'll go to Nick.
There's actually, again, a Lindsey Graham quote that I love kind of about this. And I don't know the exact quote, but he says, like, I always was obsessed with finding out who the they was that was in control, who the they was that was making the decisions, who the they was that was experts. And then I got to the Senate and I still couldn't find them. And then I realized that they didn't exist and nobody had any idea what they were doing. And I think that sentiment is what has gotten me this far in politics. Like, don't be arrogant, don't be cocky, but be confident.
Mhm.
If you are passionate about something, then that passion will drive you to learn about it, to be educated on it, and then you know enough to go in and to speak your voice and to be heard. And I think that like at every level of government, specifically the federal government, people have such big portfolios, they do not know everything. They're so receptive to people coming in and giving them information. Like it's just my biggest advice would be like learn as much as you can and then go and share that information with people who are in positions of power because they might not know what you know and you can change their minds. Like you can do it. It seems impossible, but I would just say, like, be patient. The they that is making all the decisions is just as clueless and anxious as you feel. They're just pretending that they're not so that people will trust them to lead. So pretend that you're not too, and go out and learn as much as you can, and you will be trusted to lead as well. I just think that chasing what you're passionate about and learning as much as you can, that's what's going to set you up for success. Don't try to game a system, don't try to beat a system. Just be genuine about what you care about and tell people what you think, because no one has any idea what's going on, and you will rise eventually. Also, send emails. Look people's emails up online and send them an email asking that for what you want, or telling them what you want to do. Like, it is a open, what do they say? This is not like a storyline map. We live in an open world map. And if you send emails to people, it will unlock the craziest things you could ever imagine just by sending emails. And you're not going to get a response a lot of the time. But the worst thing that could happen if you send someone an email and ask them something is they will say no. And then you will open that email, it will say no, and you will get over it and move on with your life. Or they won't respond to you. But they could say yes, and your life could completely change.
100%. I look, Steve, who's the executive director, sent me an email probably 2 or 3 years ago, and it kickstarted this long journey that brought me to New York and got me deeper involved in tech advocacy. And to your point, Ava, like sending emails, I think oftentimes Gen Z is very averse to that. I think that again, maybe it's the aversion to professionalism just in general. I know a lot of Gen Z people are like, oh, I like texting. Totally fine. But I agree with you. Like, reach out, like put in effort, because you never know what like storyline that's going to unlock, and you don't know what potential that will bring to your life. So I'll
And
hear your
follow up.
and
Don't respond to you bumping this to the top of your inbox. Like, odds are they just did not see it. Keep going. Keep going.
Especially now in today's environment where so much, I get so many AI emails that it's like sometimes you have to bump. Sometimes like that's just kind of the reality of the situation. Okay, Nick, want to hear your perspective.
And by the way, before I forget, I need to mention this. It is so noticeable in my experience with people I talk to under 25 in politics versus over 25. The amount of ghosting, slow text message responding, like not responding to emails is so bad. But I digress. I think that's a great answer. And the advice I would give too is just lock in, right? Like, I don't know if you know this, Emma, but my twin brother, identical twin brother, is super involved in Republican politics. And he was literally not involved at all 1 year ago, but he is locked in now. He's the director of Turning Point USA in Indiana, which is a group that I completely disagree with. But I say, what has Ava got there?
I just
I
need
just
to
lock in. Exactly. It's totally true. Like, I tell people, and again, especially in local politics, which is obviously kind of my specialty, local Democratic or Republican or anything areas are like retirement homes, right? Like most elected positions, even state politics, same thing, right? Like it's a lot of older people. And I think most people want to see fresh blood, right? Like I've literally met some elected officials. I've said, Nick, if you know of anybody in my city that is young that wants to run for office, have them call me. I would be happy to give up my seat and let them run for my seat, right? But it's all about relations. Ava said it too, that make that contact, right? Like go to the meetings, do the things, because if you're able to show yourself as somebody that's committed, passionate, cares, people will respond to it. But I think it's so hard to make that first move, and it's so hard to go to that first meeting or that first event where you don't know anybody. And I've been there so many times I can't even count, right? But you just have to commit to it. You just have to keep on going. If you're going to stick with it, and just keep on going.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great advice for Gen Z individuals and Gen Alpha who want to get involved. Great advice for just people, I think, in general. Everyone can stand to lock in and to respond to emails and to be respectful and be patient. But just super thankful for Ava and Nick, for both of you for coming on, sharing your story, sharing your insights with us today. As always, we look forward to being in continued conversation with the SMC community, and we will speak with you all again next week. So thank you both for jumping on.